Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us during the Lytham Partner Winter 2021 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Breza, Vice President of Lytham Partners. During this fireside chat, we welcome IBI Group ticker symbol TSX IBG, and on the pink IBIF. The company CEO and CFO are with us today. Before we begin, those not familiar with Lytham Partners, we're one of the country's leading investor relations firms with more than 2 decades experience. We will be diving into questions in a moment, but one of the final items I wanted to remind everybody that IBI is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you've not already signed up, please send me an email at breza@lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click on the one-on-one meeting request button. With that said, let's start. Let's start with you beginning with a brief overview of the company and both your backgrounds. That'd be great.
Okay, Scott Stewart, CEO of IBI Group. I'm a civil engineer, and I have been with IBI for a very, very long period of time. Stephen, over to you. Introduction.
Sure. Steve Taylor. I'm the CFO of IBI. I'm a CPA, CA, Canadian Chartered Accountant, and I have been with IBI for 8 years now.
So, Rob, maybe I could just give you a brief and the audience a brief history on IBI Group. We were established in 1974, a very long period, a long time ago. It was a very successful firm, and it grew organically until 2004, where we went out as an income trust because we saw the consolidation that was taking place in the industry. And we used the platform as an income trust. I must say that the original partners kept a very significant share of the public company. We still have some 33% of the public company. We went on a very aggressive acquisition program from 2004 to 2012, and then ran into some difficulties in 2013. I took over as the CEO at that time, and Stephen joined as the CFO in early 2014. Just a bit more color, we had a very serious challenges because we were highly leveraged, and have spent the first 4 years, 2014 through 2017, really just cleaning up the balance sheet and working to get run a normal business. A good professional practice. 2018, we launched our pivot to become a technology-driven design firm, and that has served us very well for the last 4 years, given the amount of growth, given how we responded to the pandemic, grew through that period of time, improved margin, and also have now a very significant backlog of some 17 months, which is an industry high as far as I'm concerned. The final comment I'll make, just to reflect a sort of a framework for going forward, we are in the middle of developing our strategic plan going forward, and we will be launching that at the AGM in May.
Fantastic. This conference is about 2022, and you mentioned the framework you're in now. I'm wondering if you could just talk about, some of the foresight that you had back in 2018, and obviously that strategic direction is pivotal. You obviously made a lot of strides from an execution point of view. But what are you looking at now that you see as that the last 3 years have transitioned into your mind? What are you looking forward to now as kind of key milestones with cities getting smarter, et cetera?
Well, one of the things that's unique about IBI is that we've had what we call a technology group. Or we delivered systems now going back to the early 80s, where we design, build, install, and support platforms for our systems, including toll systems, where we collect $1.4 billion in revenue for. Sorry, I have a bit of a grandchild issue in the background. Excuse me, everybody. Welcome to the days of Zoom. And I mention that because when we put together our pivot to technology in 2017, it was with that understanding that We wanted to be a disruptor. We saw that technology was going to have an ever more pervasive impact on our business and on the A&E business in particular. And our pivot had 4 components to it. And I want to reference that because it's really a reference point going forward. We wanted to apply technology in everything we did to make it a great place to work. We wanted to remove the drudgery. We wanted to be a place where people wanted to come to work because it was a great place and they didn't have to worry about where did I file that, where's that? But we just made it so efficient and pleasant. And we created some 40 RPAs or bots or robots that take away so much of that drudgery out of what we do. We also wanted to change our revenue model to be more of a software as a service kind of platform where we have a stable, predictable, long-term recurring amount of revenue. And that included then revamping some of the applications that we installed and then also then creating new platforms. And I can talk about them later. Also, we want to be part of everything that was new technology from 5G to virtual reality and augmented reality. And that has also served us really well. But we also saw that in the smart city environment, there really wasn't an ecosystem. There was fintech and medtech and other things like that. And we wanted to be at the forefront of what was happening. And so we established in this smart cities ecosystem, and we established our sandbox. And it was all about bringing together partners that are involved in creating cities, be it contractors, planners, software companies, hardware companies, to provide an environment for looking at new solutions, understanding value propositions. And I must say, I just came off of a session not more than an hour ago that was all about deconstructing the digital twin, which is going to be a platform or a new direction going forward. So that was our pivot. As we go forward, and it served us so well through the past 4 years and the pandemic, what we see going forward is other firms now saying they have to have a digital plan. And we were very much ahead of everybody else 4 years ago, when most firms didn't know how to spell digital, if I can offer a sort of an insight. And now everybody is saying we have to have a digital plan. And we feel that we're so much out in front of it. And our plan is so embracing and all-encompassing. And that's certainly the direction that we see going forward, affected by some other really key considerations, if you don't mind me going on. The pandemic, we're not going back. No. There are things that have been changed that we saw change governments, the way they operate change, and it's in many ways for the benefit. 2, government spending. The amount of government spending that has taken place will change things in the future. We see a greater emphasis on operations of assets. So using our technology then to manage and operate assets like the City of Toronto traffic control system. We're also seeing climate change. I mean, we're living it. And that has always been part of our DNA, but it will be ever more so a part of what we deal with going forward, especially because the technology side, it offers so much in the way of potential benefits. Obviously, talent is top of mind, but we also see that contrary to what has been the process in the past, and Stephen can elaborate further on our balance sheet, we do see that growth will be very much a part of our plan going forward, and more strategic growth as opposed to just organic growth. So we're quite excited about what 22 holds and beyond.
That's great. You just mentioned your balance sheet is in fantastic shape, 0.6 times on an EBITDA, level. So you have a tremendous amount of leverage. You mentioned some areas that you might be interested in terms of looking at new technologies within the sandbox. You've got a kind of an early stage window, more or less, into the sandbox. Maybe could you talk a little bit about, what they're working on, or where you see, is it a growth on the bringing it back down or making the city smarter for consumers, or is it the building operators? Where do you see the greatest emphasis being put on through the smart city ecosystem?
Well, we built the platforms that are both components of a smart city, but also more overarching coordinating platforms. And we have two major smart city deployments in India that are all about making the cities operate more efficiently, better transportation flow, responding to environmental events that take place. And it is interesting that a country like India is able to take action around smart cities, whereas in North America, it's a little harder because of established institutions that makes it more limiting in terms of approvals. So what we have in North America is, in more the developed economies, are products that focus on known client bases or services. So our Travel IQ platform is a pan-North American platform providing traveler information that assists states and other government organizations in managing their highway networks, but also makes that available on a platform for end users that goes across North America. And that has been a longstanding service that we have provided. We now offer we have a number of states, but we have moved it to the cloud. So instead of having bespoke solutions in each of the entities, it's on the cloud. So it's so much more efficient, and the margins are so much greater. We've done Curb IQ, which is also always about what's happened with the pandemic and how we manage curb space, valuable assets in cities. And that has opened up doors for us certainly in California, in Ohio, as well as across Canada. And I won't go into all of them, but we also launched in the past 12 months, and 14 months ago, it was just an idea, a workplace management system. What we do see with the pandemic is that the way people will operate is going to be quite different. It isn't going to be that you're going to come into the office every day and have your designated office area. What you'll have is a workplace management system that allows you to come into the office periodically, 1, 2, 3 days a week. You'll be assigned an office area, and you will be able to book office boardrooms, meeting rooms, and other services. But you'll also be able to collaborate with your partners or organize events in the office. And since we launched that platform a little over a year ago, we have 7,000 end users, including a national accounting firm. And that's where our real value is, because we know offices, we design offices, and we're now going to market with other channels as opposed to just IBI. So we're using furniture manufacturers for offices, and that's creating other opportunities for us to then create new offerings to our clients.
No, that's fantastic. When you think about the cross-selling opportunity across the respective geographic areas and yet industry expertise areas, talk to us about the culture you've created. You alluded to a little bit of it earlier, but trying to make sure everybody is really coordinated from a cross-team, cross-geography perspective. Describe the culture there from a goal perspective, maybe, or how it works.
Well, we have 5 KPIs, or areas of measurement, that we have for the firm. Obviously, there's growth in revenue and financial performance, but the other is collaboration. And when we started out, before we had made the investments in technology, we had a target of 15% of the revenue in any office being done in other offices. And we invested heavily in the right kinds of technologies and tools that I had mentioned. The pandemic hits, and we're now doing over 30% of the revenue created in any office, and I mean created, that is, a client, you're able to secure a contract. Over 30% of that work is now being done in other offices across the IBI universe. And so what that allows us to do is it balance these peaks and valleys out. So we're not only hiring locally here and maybe stepping back and staff in another location. We're able to use staff more effectively. And we're able to work together on projects seamlessly across time zones and geography like we have never before seen it happen. And it really has created now a culture of a one IBI. And Stephen, maybe you can talk about some of the initiatives in the investments in new office services to that sort of build off of that.
Yeah, I think one other thing I'd like to mention, Scott, just to clarify for investors, is that our intelligence sector has the group of code writers and the background in software. In order we have a long-standing, very broad client base in our buildings and infrastructure sectors as well, and that those two sectors actually function as channels to market for the technology, the knowledge, the expertise that we have in intelligence is finding its way into our other areas of business. And so if anybody looking at IBI needs to look at not only growth in our intelligence revenues and in our annual recurring revenues, but they also need to look at how strong the growth is in our backlog, the growth in backlog in the other two areas of the business. Because one thing is happening is we are getting introduced to a lot of opportunities to do work in those other sectors where we might not have got in the door before. But and Scott referenced before the session we put on in our Smart City Sandbox today about digital twins. Well, one of the things that was discussed in the presentations on digital twins is that you've now got real estate companies out there and investors in real estate who are digitizing entire cities. They are creating a digital twin of entire cities as a way of moving their real estate businesses forward. Why are they doing that? Because the digital twin is it's a gateway for their real estate clients to actually minimize the operating cost of running their business going forward. And when one of our clients asked us to design a building and that building gets constructed, the cost of operating all of those buildings is going to be 10 times whatever the initial construction cost was. So we are heavily involved in terms of becoming part of this digital twin world, generating designs that are in a database, so that we can participate in the ongoing revenue streams from the asset management that all of these end use clients, they need asset management as part of what the service offering is, so that they can minimize the cost and increase the efficiency of the buildings that they're building. And that stretches into a number, it's energy use, it's security, it's a whole bunch of different elements of the business. And so it is absolutely critical for us to continue our evolution into the digital world in our buildings and infrastructure parts of our business, to be able to actually play a leading role in this digitization world, the creation of the digital twins that will represent large parts of the world in the next 5 or 10 years. Now, as Scott had made reference to, we have carried that thought process into our own internal systems within the business, building tools to run the back office of our business, so we've got scalability. Whenever the business grows, we don't have to add any resources in order to be able to hire or handle greater volumes of work. Also to integrate our design tools, the tools that our professionals actually use, to make sure that we're 100% digital in everything that we're doing. So we're making a lot of forward progress in many areas that will position us well to be leaders in the digitized world that will exist in 5 to 10 years.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Both maybe for you, Scott and Stephen, can you talk about some of the maybe verticals that were maybe underperforming last year? Maybe it was, I don't know, transportation or education, but where do you see maybe changes? What I'm trying to understand is changes maybe going from bad to worse, or maybe good from maybe going to slow down a little bit. Anything from a vertical perspective you'd point out that's either high or low or changing on the edge?
Steve, I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I think one area that I'd like to mention, we have talked about growth, being between 6 and 8% in our intelligence sector. First 3 quarters of this year, we haven't achieved those kinds of targets. And there are a couple of reasons why that has occurred. We report our numbers in Canadian dollars, and the Canadian dollar appreciated against the US dollar early on in the year. That actually impacted the absolute dollar value of revenue that we were reporting out of the US. But also in conjunction with that, there were a lot of intelligence clients that have been longstanding clients of ours who were dependent for their funding on projects for things like gas taxes and that sort of stuff. And in 2020, after the pandemic, there were a lot less people on the road. That translated to a lot less gas tax revenue, which also translated to lower budgets for some of the transit agencies and the people that we have long-standing relationships with. Those circumstances are returning to more normal state situation at the moment. And so that, in conjunction with some of the other intelligence contracts we've signed, like Scott made reference to City of Toronto Operations Center. We also have other managed services contracts that we're signing in the intelligence area. We fully anticipate, as we roll into 2022 and going forward, that we will get back to the historic levels of growth that we've experienced in intelligence, which is critical because that's clearly a driving force for the overall financial success of the business.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's interesting to understand how everything you guys are kind of get a feel for a bunch of different indicators of the economy. You see it kind of firsthand in different aspects, whether it's more cars on the road or not, et cetera. So the information you guys gather really is basic root level, as I kind of think about it.
I think other growth factors, certainly here in Canada, which makes up a significant, it's over 60% of our overall business. There is a lot of money being spent by government in terms of transit projects. And we have a very, very active transit architecture and engineering design process. We've got several large contracts that are underway at the moment, and more that we're in the bid phase that, we could potentially be announcing things in the future. So all of that transit stuff here in Canada is going to be a driver for increased financial performance in IBI as well. And everywhere where that transit goes in, it's a development opportunity for us because we also work with developers who are building mixed use and high-rise residential units. When a transit line goes in, every station that we design becomes a node for future development of mixed use and residential high-rise. So we're winning on both counts in terms of new work coming in the door. So that plus all of one other key differentiator about IBI that some of our competitors do not have the urban planning capability that our firm has. And our firm is very strong in urban planning and has currently plots of land that are over 5,000 acres in total that we are doing the urban planning for. Our past experience going back over the 40 years at IBI is that after we do that planning, we're in the driver's seat in terms of working with clients, getting permissions on behalf of clients, and actually doing the designs of buildings for them on those acres that we plan. So that sets us up for a very good, strong future pipeline of work.
Absolutely. That's a great point. One interesting comment I want to offer up for either you, Scott, or Stephen. We talked about some of the government spending. Clearly, the U.S. is spending to try to catch up. There's no point in belaboring where it is from an economic point of view. We know it's dilapidated from an infrastructure point of view. Yet we're also starting to see noises from other governments around the world saying we're now looking at China, everybody is, and saying, wait a minute, we've got to start spending more from a government perspective to keep up our infrastructure. Is that comment, are you hearing that around the world, or how are you seeing global spending, I guess?
it's pretty universal. Certainly, there's much more prominence given to the U.S. in terms of the Biden infrastructure initiative. And what we're also seeing, it's not only a replacement of old technology or old infrastructure, but it's investment in new technology and new infrastructure. So electrification, for example, electrification of transit systems, green energy for public transit services, platforms for electric vehicle charging, broadband communications into rural areas, all areas that IBI is part of. That and that's in Canada, the United States, as well as in Europe, and we have made investments in, as an example, an electric vehicle charging company because they have unique technology around not only the ability to charge, but the ability to then arbitrage on the energy, buy it cheap overnight, and then sell it back into the home during the day, if you will. And there's so much more that IBI can then add value to around that. So there is a lot of money being spent in infrastructure, but it's also smart infrastructure. The other thing that's really interesting in the context of the pandemic is the review of the supply chains, and we're living it, and the concerns about the impact then on the local economy long term. The automotive sector not being able to sell or complete the vehicles because of chips that are manufactured in China. PPE that couldn't be provided according to the original plan because it was expected to be available in 2 days out of China. We're seeing a significant movement in manufacturing, smart manufacturing, and supply chain or logistics in terms of land development. And it is measurable now, and industrial land around either manufacturing or distribution centers, smart distribution is at a premium, and there's a tremendous amount of growth in that. So that's also one of the things that we're seeing out of the pandemic, and where there is significant investment being made in providing that kind of capability.
No, that makes a lot of sense. We didn't talk about the hiring side of the equation. I know back in Q2, you went and were able to hire people. I know vacations are part of that as well. We've seen that play out in 2021 here. As you look at hiring going out into 2022, to kind of maybe just say grow normally or within the parameters that you're thinking of, but how long do you perceive the backlog emphasis to change? It seems one would assume that the backlog is fairly strong at this point with all the projects and spending, but yet it's important to deliver people product on time or their designs on time. So you're kind of caught between the rock and the hard place. You'd love to see the backlog keep growing. How do you manage that internally with, trying to keep it high yet, keep a little safety net, but yet deliver on time,
Well, it is a challenge, and certainly every industry is being affected right now with labor or talent. One of the things we were doing to the earlier description of how we're using these platforms globally and being able to do this work share with more than 30% of the fee being distributed is setting up centers of excellence globally. As is one example, Greece went through a major infrastructure build when it joined the European Union. And now that has come to an end, but there's a tremendous amount of talent that is available. So it's adding an opportunity, or it creates an opportunity for us. And we've established then an office in Greece that deals with infrastructure design, civil engineers, structural engineers, and they're delivering great value to us back in North America, if you will, but also it creates a platform for us then to use that capability elsewhere in the international realm. We're doing the same thing in Mexico, where there's more talent available on architecture and design studios. So we're building a design studio. So that's helping us to, by the use of technology, to grow our capacity, but to be able to take advantage of the marketplaces that are less competitive. We're making other investments in staff, as you might appreciate, but we just again making it a great place to be at IBI. It is noteworthy that we did our engagement survey, and we do this every 2 years at staff. And we've had this past go around the highest engagement of staff, of IBI being a great place to work, of IBI being a place where you would recommend it to others, as IBI being a place where you would grow and your career. And the scores were all above 80%, which is unheard of, at least from the experience that we've seen in the industry. So it's the investment in staff wherever we are, and with tools and a quality environment, but it's also then taking advantage of the marketplaces globally where we can bring in more capacity.
Perfect. Well, that's about all the time we have today. I wanted to thank both Scott and Stephen. Both of them will be, or one or the other, or both may be available here. If you have not signed up for a one-on-one meeting, please send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, at lythampartners.com, and be happy to set up a meeting for you. With that, I want to say thanks again to both Scott and Stephen, and have a good conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.